Have you ever had a really good welcome? Just a welcome where you know that you were looked for, anticipated, people were excited to see you. I get that welcome every time I come home. This is my dog. His name's Tigger. He's a 5-month-old Old English sheepdog. In a moment of weakness this summer, we decided to get a new puppy, and so we got this little guy. We say little, the picture doesn't quite do him justice. He's 5 months old and about 55 pounds. He's going to be about 130 pounds when he's full grown. He has just this temperament where he is living his best life every single moment. So if I leave to go to the office and come home after a couple hours, he is just so excited to see me. If I go outside to take the trash out and come home after 5 minutes, he's so excited to see me. He'll meet me at the top of the gate, tail just wagging, whole body shaking, prancing up and down. I feel like I'm the Beatles, you know? Like I feel like I'm some kind of celebrity where this is just, it's the welcome I feel like I've deserved for a long time. If you have a dog, you know that welcome, right? You get home and it's like you've been gone forever and the dog cannot wait to see you. There is something about having a dog welcome you home. There's something wonderful about a tail-wagging welcome. This week we're going to think about what it means for us to be a church that offers welcome. Over the next 4 weeks, Pastor Mike and I are going to begin to talk about some values that we think outline who we are as Suncrest United Methodist Church. You'll see them at the top of your bulletin, right? And it says, Suncrest United Methodist Church is a community of hope. We are a community of hope. And man, the world needs some hope today, don't we? We need to know some deep kind of hope. We need to know that there is something good happening in the midst of the difficulty. We need to know that there's light in the darkness. We need to be a community of hope. Now, HOPE is an acronym, and that stands for hospitality, offering, purpose, and engagement. And over the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk more about what those things are. But this week we look at hospitality. We look at welcome. And if you'll see in the bulletin, it says, we seek, welcome, and gather persons with God in person and online, right? We seek, welcome, and gather persons with God in person and online. The work of hospitality, the work of welcome is fundamental to who we are as the people of God. Now, maybe when you hear the word hospitality, you got to get an image of something that's fairly tame, right? You get an image of someone who sets a nice table. Maybe they put out their fancy tablecloth. Maybe they put out their nice china. Maybe they work to make good food. Maybe when you have practiced hospitality at your house, it's like when I practice it at mine, right? We're going to have some people over, and so we spend the entire day cleaning our house to get ready for the people to come over, because you want things to be perfect, but it feels a little tame, right? Hospitality is more than just putting out the good coffee. Hospitality is more than just putting out the nice china. Hospitality is more than just practicing these kind of tame ways of being that we've thought. Hospitality is radical and subversive. At its core, the true biblical practice of hospitality is transformational for us who practice it, who offer it, and those who receive it. Now, throughout the Old Testament, the practice of hospitality shows up time and time again. And I want us to understand something. Particularly in the Old Testament, the practice of hospitality was a life and death situation. The practice of welcoming, and in particular, welcoming strangers, was a life and death situation. Because in the Old Testament, you are where? You're out in the middle of the desert. You're out in the middle of the arid, dry wilderness. And if someone wanders into your camp, whether you know them or not, either you're going to feed them and give them something to drink, or they're going to die. So the practice of hospitality, the practice of desert hospitality, of this welcome that shares the resources that we have with the other, this is a life and death matter. God takes hospitality very seriously throughout the Bible. The practice of hospitality is the practice where we welcome people that are different than us, where we welcome strangers, where we welcome people that we do not know, where we create space and make room for others to be engaged and feel the same welcome that we have felt. Henry Nouwen, who is a writer and thinker, says this: if there is any concept worth restoring to its original depth and evocative potential, it is the concept of hospitality. This concept of welcome and hospitality is one of the most fundamental things that we practice as Christians. You hear it in Romans that we read this morning. In Romans 12, the writer is kind of giving us this list of ways we should live. And I've actually started reading this passage at almost all the weddings that I get to perform, because I think there's something beautiful about kind of setting our life together by these practices and principles and guidelines, right? Outdo one another in showing honor, practice mutual affection, in so much as it's up to you, live at peace with all. These practices that we are given in Romans 12 are practices that we need to practice as individuals, as families, and as the church. Think about the difference that we could make in the world if we as the church, both as individuals and corporately, put the list of practices that we read this morning from Romans 12 into practice. It would be a radical and revolutionary thing. But you hear what Paul writes when he says, contribute to the needs of the saints. So he's saying, if there are people that you know who have a need, care for them. But then he says, extend hospitality to strangers. So he says this act of welcome, this act of bringing others in, is not just limited to the people you know, it's limited to strangers. But then he says a little bit further on, feed your enemies. Give them something to drink. Now, I'm not sure what he means by that. Someone asked me in the virtual coffee hour what I thought Paul was saying when he says, because this would heap coals upon their head. Paul may be being a little passive-aggressive. I'm not sure. But there is this idea that says we welcome and care for even our enemies. The practice of hospitality is radical and subversive. And when we practice it well, when we practice hospitality and welcome well, it is an act of resistance. Because we begin to say that the culture that we live in, that is so governed by the ideas of personal freedom and the ideas that says we get to make any decision that we want and it doesn't impact anybody else, hospitality is very clear that that's not true. The practice of hospitality that welcomes the other is radical and different than what we have seen, because it begins to say that we are all deeply connected. We like to think that we're independent, free people, right? We like to think that we can do whatever we please, that it doesn't really impact others, that we can just kind of live our life. But the practice of hospitality says we're not just independent, we're interdependent. And the ways that we care for one another, the ways that we welcome one another, the ways that we engage with those around us transforms us and them. We learn to put others' needs ahead of our own and extend care and grace. This act of welcome is radical and revolutionary. It's not easy. I'm not going to stand here and think that hospitality is easy. In fact, it's very difficult because it involves hard work. It involves hard work because it requires something of us. To welcome people well requires something of us. It requires our time and our resources. It requires our money and our willingness to care for the other. It is not a simple thing. It is difficult because it steps on the toes of our busyness. I heard someone say once that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. And often I wonder whether our busyness separates us more from each other and from God than anything else. I feel that. I'm sure you do too. There are things that seem to be pressing in. There are things that seem like we need to get them done. There are things that we need to accomplish. We've got tasks and ideas and agendas and all that kind of stuff. I had it happen this week. Literally, I was writing a sermon on hospitality in my office when someone walked in, and I had this choice to make. Do I set aside the thing that I'm doing to pay attention to the person, or do I say, I'm really busy right now and I need you to step out? It was a weird moment as I tried to figure out what the right thing was to do. You have this experience too, right? Where people seem to kind of come into your orbit, and we have to make the decision as to whether we're going to welcome and care for them, or whether we're going to continue to do things the way that we've always done. One of the things that's foundational about a good welcome is someone who is willing to focus their attention on you. Now, when Beth and I were in seminary, we were newlyweds. We were 10 hours, 12 hours away from home, and so we didn't make it home very often. We didn't see our family very often. And this family in town named the Palmers adopted us. They became our second family. They invited us to birthday parties. They invited us and threw birthday dinners for us. Carla was from Alabama, and she made the very best fried chicken I have ever had. I mean, you would go to Carla's house and walk in, and it would smell amazing, and the food was fantastic. But the thing that I remember about Carla was not just the things that she set on her table, but it was this way that she had of being with people. When I would sit down at Carla's table, Carla's full attention would turn to you. She cared about you. She listened to you. She wanted to know what was happening in your life. When I sat with Carla, I knew that I was heard and seen. Have you ever been with someone like that who welcomes you? I mean, who welcomes you well, who knows you, who listens to you, who hears you, and whose full attention is given to you, who's not distracted by the things that happen around them, but who's willing to focus on you? I wear an Apple Watch, right? I like my Apple Watch, except when I'm talking to somebody and it starts to buzz, either because I'm getting a bunch of text messages or a phone call or an email, and I find myself glancing down, and suddenly the conversation that I'm having with someone gets interrupted because they think that something else is more important. I've had to train myself to ignore the buzzing of my watch so that I can focus on the people in front of me. That's the work of hospitality. A willingness to set aside the things that seem to be pressing, to focus on the people in front of us. So what does it mean for us to be a community of hospitality? What does it mean for us to be a community of radical welcome? Well, I think one of the things it means is that we welcome people to bring their full selves. We welcome people to bring their full selves. We don't tell people that they have to have things figured out before they come. We welcome people to bring their brokenness and their joys, their doubts and uncertainties. We welcome people to bring the fullness of who they are, rather than feel like they have to cover something up. One of the things that makes me really proud to be one of the pastors here at Suncrest is the way that we practice welcome, particularly of people that are different than us. Over and over, I've seen you do it time and time again. Recently, I was having a conversation with someone who was talking about starting a recovery ministry. And they said to me, how have you dealt with the fact that the church maybe isn't so sure about the people that will come to a recovery ministry? And I said, I didn't have to deal with that. Because the people at Suncrest are willing to share their resources and their building and their space with people that are not like them. I'm grateful for that. And I continue to be proud of that as we gather together. Friends, you are welcoming people that are unlike you. We're welcoming people and extending a radical welcome to people that need to hear a message of hope and to know that they are loved and that they matter to God and to us. We are on that path, and God is continuing to invite us to expand that work. To practice hospitality well means that we allow people to bring their full selves, and we welcome the fullness of who they are. It does not happen by accident. The practice of hospitality requires deliberate action, even in difficult times. When St. Augustine lived, he lived in a time when Rome was falling. Rome was being attacked by the Visigoths, and the Roman Empire was crumbling, and there was uncertainty and fear, particularly among Christians who weren't sure what this meant for them in this moment. They were living in a time where their world felt completely out of control. And this is what St. Augustine wrote to them so that they could learn how to live deliberately in difficult times. He said this: "Be meek, sympathize with the suffering, bear with the weak, and on this occasion of the concourse of so many strangers and needy and suffering people, let your hospitality and your good works abound." The world is very different than it was 2 years ago. And there's a lot of people that are afraid and uncertain. There's a lot of us that feel like we don't know what course is going to be tracked from here on. There are a lot of people who are feeling a deep anxiety and fear. For us, church, to be a place that practices deliberate welcome and hospitality, for us to heed the words of St. Augustine, to be meek and sympathize with the suffering, to allow our hospitality and good works to abound, it seems as relevant now as it did when he wrote it 600 years ago. We remember that the practice of hospitality is not something that we force. In fact, it's not even a task, it's a way of life. And it's a way of life that's deeply rooted in gratitude. When we practice gratitude that understands that we are grateful for what God has done in our life and for the welcome that God has extended to us, we learn to extend that same welcome to others. Hospitality is the work of welcoming people, in particular, the radical work of welcoming strangers and refugees and welcoming people that we don't know and welcoming people that aren't like us. This work is deeply rooted in gratitude. If it's not rooted in gratitude, in response to what God has done for us, it becomes grudging. It becomes a task. It becomes something difficult. Gratitude, this deep remembrance of the work that God has done in our life and continues to do, is the thing that becomes the foundation for hospitality. How do you practice gratitude in your life? What is the role that gratitude and gratefulness plays? Man, it becomes easy to be cynical people, isn't it? But when we learn to practice gratitude, we change the viewpoint from which we stand, and we begin to understand that we have been welcomed and accepted and brought in by God when we were far off and strangers, and we now practice that with others. A daily practice of gratitude fuels a life of welcome. I think perhaps the most pertinent question we ask is one that I read this week from a writer named Esther de Waal. Esther was kind of researching the ways that the Benedictine monks did hospitality and practice hospitality. And she said for them, it all comes down to two questions. Did we see Christ in them? Did they see Christ in us? Did we see Christ in them? Did they see Christ in us? Friends, what if our interactions were driven by those questions? What if the moments that we walked away from an interaction with another person, whether here or at the grocery store or at our workplace, was founded in those two questions. Did they see Christ in us, and did I see Christ in them? Were we able to see that Jesus is present in surprising ways through surprising people? Were we able to practice welcome, realizing that we are not just welcoming people, but in doing so, we are actually welcoming Jesus? Did we see Christ in them? Were we transformed by their presence? And more appropriately, did they see Christ in us? The work of hospitality changes both those who receive it and those who practice it. It is radical and revolutionary. Church, may we be a place of tail-wagging welcome, a place where those who are looking for hope are greeted and loved and known. Would you pray with me? Gracious God, thank you for the ways that you call us to be about this subversive work. Thank you for the ways that you call us to be about the radical work of caring for and welcoming those who are searching for and looking for hope. Thank you for the invitation that is given to open our lives to those who are longing for something new. Help us to be people that practice hospitality in a radical and life-giving way. Open our eyes to see Christ in the other, that they may learn and see Christ in us. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.